I'm from Philadelphia, but I live in Phoenix, Arizona right now. The years is about 1993, 1994. It's a really big time for hip hop, and it was just a great time to be a music fan. And so we would trade tapes at school. And one day, a buddy of mine, he challenged us. He said, well, you guys like rap, but can you write a rap song? And we were all like, let's try it. So we sat down and we started writing, and honestly, out of the four of us, mine was the worst. Like, everybody was like, dude, you gotta keep practicing. So I did. I just kept going, and now I wrote more and more and more because I wanted to be as good as my friends. My friends were brilliant, and they still are. And that's what inspired me to keep going. And eventually, I started making beats on my PlayStation. There was a PlayStation program called MTV Music Generator. I started making beats on that, and I took those beats to school. My friends liked them, and then I really don't know how it got into the hands of a studio engineer, who then would ask me to come and work at his studio, and so I started learning engineering. So I went from listening, enjoying it, then to producing, then to engineering, like recording records. And then in my off time during an engineer phase, if there was no one coming in the studio, I'd get in there and sneak in and record my own music. And I was convinced no one would ever want to hear it. It was very like nerdy, positive, what I thought was like smart rap compared to, I guess, what else was popular in the music world. So I was like, no one's ever gonna want to hear this, but at least I want to hear it. So we'll talk about my favorite video game. We'll talk about comic books. We'll talk about fun times, and and eventually one of my friends was like, dude, I think you really got something here. I think with the advent of the internet and MySpace and the ways to easily share your music, it gave me the courage to kind of put things on the internet, and then it got popular. There it is.
First you only live once, that's cool, I suppose. You can live forever, through a song you can do. Experience, you see the highs and the lows. Experimentation with the flows, cause God knows. You learn more about life from Hotchkiss works. Makes me ever to the guy in the trench is that wrong. Living for that song, learning from that lyric and staring at the wrong. We living off love, never needing the milk. Grow from the enlightenment and warmth that we feel. Yeah. Overflow of emotion from chilling, chasing the girls to floating over the ocean and maybe changing the world. First two emails like, hey, that's tight. Next two emails, you changed my life. Even if I inspire, people call it a timely. All you gotta do is rewind. Hands up, infinite lies, side to side. Infinite lies, lies, yeah.
The moment that it all became a career to me was when I put out a record that ranked on the top like 19 on iTunes. It was like number 19, and I'm next to like Lady Gaga, Lil Wayne, Kanye West. I'm like, whoa, these people are professional musicians. Meanwhile, I was a school teacher. So I was teaching that by day, making music at night. And I'm like, wow, the rest of these guys don't have a second job. They're just musicians. So it really made me think about taking music seriously. I was like, people actually like this. So I put in my 2 weeks notice. I was ready to jump the gun. I was like, all right, well, let's just do this. Like, I can always go back. I feel like teaching is a profession where they'll always have a need for people who want to do it, and are qualified. So I'll do my best and hopefully never have to come back. And it's been about 7 years now.
So, what's your name? This is L. I do my thing, and yes, I do it really well. And if it's too well, then I say that it's swell. And if they don't like it, man, they can go to hell. What's your name? Yo, Sahara, like the desert? Oh snap, that's pretty pleasant. So when I be rapping on mics, they say to rap it. Yo, when I be in, I'm actually living in the desert, which is Arizona, which means it's hot as hell. Which makes me really happy to come here to the Baltimore, where I can maybe get some seafood, but I can't, so that's pretty rude. So anyway, what's your name?
A month later, I get an email from MC Chris, who's a very accomplished nerd music star, and asked me to open for him on tour. And he's like, hey, I got a 44-date tour in 50 days. Do you want to do it? And I was like, whoa, I had never done a tour like that before. But if I was still working my teaching job, I would have not been able to take that. But since I wasn't, yes, I said, let's do it. And I'm really glad I did it. It really was the launch pad for the rest of my career. Being able to meet fans. We went to so many cities, hundreds of kids every night, and those people have become like my fans, my friends, my family, you know. And it was because I had the freedom to do it.
About to turn off the lights in the TV, but as I walk by, man, what do I see? An HBO ad, Watchmen's out! New season, this is pleasing. I don't think I'm leaving.
2008, I was running a blog and like an internet radio show. I guess it was like an early podcast before I really knew what I was doing, with a DJ friend of mine. And we would chat all the time, and we'd interview people. And I went to interview MC Frontalot. And this was at South by Southwest 2008. His movie, NerdCore Rising, was debuting that same time. And I had a movie that had put my music into it called Second Skin, which is on Netflix, about like video game addiction, something I don't know anything about. So I sat down with him, and he was so cool, and he told me about NerdCore, and I was like, NerdCore, eh? Like, what is it, you know? And I'm asking him as a journalist, but also as a curious person, a musician who also was doing the same thing. It's like, wait, that sounds like what I do, you know? Like, just people who aren't necessarily ashamed of those nerdy hobbies and habits that they have, and then they shine a light on them through their art. And I was like, whoa, this is really dope. And I guess it would have been then a year later at PAX East, maybe, he asked me to come out and do a song with him. And I think that was, at that point, was like, all right, you're NerdCore.
Excuse me, I mean like show me my sense. Show me my sense. Who's he? Excuse me, I mean like show me my sense. They don't consider me popular because we rockin' the style. Putting the whole thing in monitor. They couldn't see me binoculars. We stay on like a porch light. Getting stretched out the course light. Heard your partner need to boost me and I've been dropping in like it's Fortnite. Arizona, so we stay warm. Ball shorts to the J-Star. Dark ball like I'm Akon, or we fall hard like a Trayvon. Still raw, yeah, still tall. Hometown is the billboard. These days in the y'all standing, so we charge up like an all cannon. Shots fired and they all landing. That's the game is meant to know I'm the GOAT. Feeling waving like I'm flowing the boat. Do it up, I'm still the show when I'm close. Team Mega, watch out, got no class like a dropout. Can't pop out when we involved. See a star like a knockout.
My first album was called The Call in 2006, and it was a very kind of serious album. You know, I talked about like poverty, I talked about religion, I talked about, you know, politics, and they weren't necessarily things that would fit under the umbrella of nerdy. And so I just didn't think that would be a fair, you know, assessment of my music fully, because yes, I am a nerd and I do love nerdy things, but I also want to talk about really important things. And so I felt like if you cast that net on top of me and call me NerdCore, I'm stuck. And I'm like, oh no, I wanna talk about something else, you know, and I couldn't do it. And I talked to Frontalot about that, and he was just like, I don't worry about that. And I remember, I think KRS-One says, hey, if I am hip hop, then that means anything I do by default is hip hop. And I was like, whoa, kind of blew my mind. So it can be anything. So why does it have to be one thing? So that was really what it taught me. And so I said, I can do anything I want. I can be creative. I can be nerdy. I can have fun. So that's what I did. And so sometimes my projects are nerdy. Sometimes they're not. But I think people still enjoy them. And you'll find something in there you like or can relate to. You know, from a kid who grew up in an inner city, loves video games, loves comic books, but also loves hip hop, and has a lot of relatable experiences. So that's really what I try to do in my music, is represent myself, because, you know, if I tried to do it for someone else, I would never be satisfied.
And on a command efficient at me, so we popped the mega buster. And I'm exactly. Then I took a turn that was hot. Every time I fired a shot, she didn't dodge. The beach blast from the yard cannon and smiled at me as every shot was landed. But I didn't know what she was planning. Suddenly I started understanding. I know what this is letting me win. Giving me what I need so I can get to the end. By the 17th, it began to stagger. Down to the